will join us shortly. This is a special meeting, so the agenda is a bit different for those in attendance. We do not take public comment at special meetings, but of course, we ask you guys please to stay for the duration of the meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda to add an executive session due to possible litigation.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. Roll call vote? Or do we have to read it?
Not on this one.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. I will now entertain a motion to actually move us fully into executive session.
Madam Chair, I move that we move to executive session per Idaho Code 742006-1F to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated. The mere presence of legal counsel at executive session does not satisfy this requirement.
Motion has been made. Do I have a second? Second. Roll call vote?
Chair Taylor?
Aye.
Trustee Griffin?
Aye.
Trustee Sue?
Aye.
Trustee Benz?
Aye.
Trustee Jennings?
All right, we'll now move into executive session. We'll be in there momentarily. We'll be right back out to continue the meeting in public. All right. We are out of executive session. We will resume the agenda on 4 action items, and we will go directly into our nutrition services bid. Dr. Russell?
Trustees, tonight, we're going to have Director Stoffer share some information around our nutrition services bid. Mr. Stoffer.
Trustee Taylor, Board of Trustees. A few weeks ago, you supported and approved of a nutrition bid contract. There was 3 or 4 items that were identified after that approval that there were some objections to. Those were reviewed by both the team and by our legal, and we found that they were appropriate objections. And so you have in front of you an amendment for 4 different items, specific items, that actually will provide the district a benefit. The costs were less than what we had originally shared with you, and so in doing so, we now have 4 more items that we wanted to present to you with the new pricing with them, and for the board to decide whether or not to take those on. And it is our recommendation that we do that. It is in the benefit of the district.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stoffer. Trustees, any questions for Mr. Stoffer? Okay, if not, I will go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the bid as presented within the board agenda today.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We will now move on to B, student transportation services bid. Dr. Russell?
Trustees, tonight we are going to discuss our student transportation services bid. I think it would be important for the folks in the audience and the folks listening to kind of understand why we're in this context and where we are with that. So this year, our bus contract is ending, and we had a discussion in December, maybe January, it was midwinter, with an executive from the Brown Bus Company, and Mr. Carpenter came in and spoke with us, and we had some discussions at that point about continuing our contract with the bus company. At that time, a number was shared around 10 to 14% increase is what we were kind of looking at if we continued to go with the company. If we went out to bid, the price was around 25 to 30% increase is what the district would see with that. So we decided to wait for Brown Bus. And then at that point, we began to make some of the decisions that we made around our district, because we were having to make many changes at that point as well to come within and balance our budget. And if you may recall, that had to do with closing of the schools, redrawing the boundaries, changing the high school schedules. All of that was to bring our district back within our budgets after many of the things that happened with the state, change in funding, the loss of enrollment, and then the ADA enrollment switch at the state level. Come late spring, we did receive a preliminary cost from Brown Bus, and it was a 24% increase, which was close to $2 million, which is what the district had no way of being able to afford at that point, nor was the district in shape to make more cuts to make that contract.
Was there any warning that it was going to be that big of a jump?
There was not. The only warning,
You were suspecting it was going to be still
14% and under,
right around there.
and we were hoping that we can maybe work some things through that.
Okay.
So when the 24% came to the district, at that point, great concern came to us, and we realized that we were either going to have to do 2 things. One is we were going to have to make more cuts. We were either going to have to use some of our one-time payments that we got from the state and not provide services to the schools, or we're going to go out to bid. And so at that point is we came this information to the board and decided that we felt it was important to go out to bid, even though we were bidding very late in the game. And that's why we are here today. And I'm going to ask Mr. Stoffer if he would come forward and start sharing our RFP process and kind of where we are with that.
And I just want to reiterate, the board approved for you guys to go out to bid. Yep.
Correct.
Trustee Taylor, Board of Trustees. Again, I have a simple PowerPoint in front of you, kind of going through some of the similar things that Dr. Russell did. And so,
Hold on just a second. Can we get this on the screen up here?
Yeah, it's screens out.
Tyler, we're not seeing it.
we'll pause for technical difficulties.
Yeah. Let's give me a chance to read. Now we gotta wait on.
Okay, back to that presentation.
All right, Trustee Taylor, Board of Trustees. Again, a little bit of some information. Dr. Russell shared a lot of the background through his comments, but just wanted to reiterate that as we started discussions, because it was truly our intent to continue our relationship that we've had with Brown Bus and in trying to move forward with a relationship we've had for many generations, not just years, many generations. So again, just to reiterate, there was initially a 24% increase that was provided for our transportation services. We did a little bit of discussion that did come down to about 21%, and that's where we came and visited with the board about direction with the options that we did have at our disposal. And that's the point in time where the board asked us to put out an RFP and approved for an RFP to be placed out.
Because that 20% would have been roughly about $2 million, correct?
Underneath $2 million, but yes, it was a significant increase for us. And again, looking at our finances, that was not something that fit within our current budget, and that's why we made sure that you were aware of it and we brought it to your attention.
Sorry, the 14% increase initially, that was something that would fit in the budget, right? I mean, it was going to be close, but we could work with that.
It was a little
within
bit,
our
it
budget.
still would have been over, but we felt that we had some opportunity, we would have some
Okay.
opportunities at that point in time to work it and work through some of the components within inside the contract to bring it within our parameters.
But this is just beyond what, okay.
So after that, I just wanted to give a little bit of a background. I'll go ahead with our next screen, just a timeline. After that board approval for the RFP, we put out an RFP on the May 12th. That's when we made the illegal announcements. We did run the illegal announcements for 4 different times. May 17th, we held a pre-bid conference at the South Middle School training, the Drivers Training Center, the old Drivers Training Center. We had 5 different companies that were present at that point in time. And then we began the process for companies to start working through the bidding process. And yesterday at 2 p.m., our bids were due, and we did our opening at 2 p.m. yesterday. Now, the next screen that we we have for you is just as a reminder of the key areas for the district. One of the things that we were charged with was finding ways to stay within our budget. So we have been actively exploring those, working with many different individuals, exploring different districts and things that they have done to mitigate different costs as well. We also wanted more control of our routes to make sure that we felt that we were being the most efficient and effective with our budget and with the money, and also for our students. And then the last part of that too is optimizing opportunities for state reimbursements. Now, there's 2 components to this that I'm going to step into just a little bit. The first one is when our current contract, we get one level of reimbursement, and that's right around that 45 to 50%. It depends on the year. There's a big pie that is distributed from the state, and you get a percentage of that pie. What it equated to us in the past is about 45% to 50% of our contract gets reimbursed, and it's based off of one number. With the other opportunities that we have, and the state has put into code opportunities for district to take under their own umbrella multiple different reimbursement percentages that are higher than that 45% when you put them together. An example is that is when we propose to the transportation manager positions, there are 2 different reimbursements that we get that equate to more than the 45% that we were receiving for the one bid that we currently have in our current contract. So we were looking for different opportunities to help maximize our taxpayer dollars. That was one of the charges that you gave us, and that's one of the things that we have been able to find through this transportation reimbursement process. So those were things that we were trying to accomplish as we put out our RFP.
Well, and it seems like you did accomplish many of those things.
We believe we have,
yeah.
and that's what we want to share with you next.
Good.
We believe we've been able to accomplish that.
Well, I'm sorry, Courtney. So this question has come up quite a bit from the public with the transportation manager. That actually opens up another reimbursement line. So now we have 2. So that's going to offset some of those costs for the
Correct.
transportation manager. I think that's important to put that out there because yeah, it does. We had another transportation manager. It just looks like we're spending more district money, but in fact, it opens up that revenue for reimbursement from the state.
Trustee Taylor and Trustee Kirkman, that's correct. That's one of the reasons why we proposed and broke down that scale at our previous meeting of what that would do for us.
So you had to help us save money, but then you also found us money, so you're magic.
We'll see. We'll see.
There's
Magic
no-
is a far stretch. So,
Okay,
So again, with these key areas, that's what we set forth to try to accomplish in this process. Our next slide has a little bit about, again, those steps to reduce our costs. What we have done already is with our district software, same principle applies to the district transportation software. Again, we are able to receive a higher percentage of reimbursement when the district owns the software. Again, we had one reimbursement rate underneath our current contract. The new RFP allowed us to have opportunities to get more and a higher level of reimbursement based off of those line items. District software is one of those. And again, I just explained the transportation manager and the customer service representatives. Those fall under that same one where there's two different reimbursements that we receive for them in lieu of just one, which equate to a higher percentage than what we have been receiving. And then also we took and we wanted to build an RFP that took on routing. The student discipline, as we discussed with many of the bus companies and many surrounding districts, that is an atypical thing that's found in contracts, is that the bus company handles the discipline. And it's also an expensive component for some of those other districts. And so that was something that we looked at, and we felt that it was be prudent for us to handle underneath our umbrella as well.
Chair Taylor.
Dr. Russell.
Mr. Stauffer, would you be able to share? I think we also had quite a few discussions with other school districts that had recently gone to RFP, and those were some of the things they had recommended that had brought down their overall cost from their contracts. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Chair Taylor, Dr. Russell, yes. One of the things that we did is we really looked at other surrounding districts and their RFPs that they had put out. And these were common things that we found in theirs that, in speaking with them, as Dr. Russell mentioned, they felt were really good driving forces to bringing down costs. And we do feel that it's accomplished that. And we look at, when we get down to the end of the row where we look at the bids that we received, we felt that these measures did help accomplish pushing our overall contract down into parameters that we felt comfortable with, and provided the district additional opportunities to recuperate some of the money through reimbursements. The same thing could be said for student discipline with the actual gas component, where we utilize state contracting prices, and we can start to standardize or levelize our gassing prices as well. And then also, one of the things that did come with that in a bidding platform is we're one of the unique districts of our size that do not have their own busing facilities as part of their infrastructure. All the other large large districts that we spoke to have their own facilities, which also opens up opportunities for multiple bidders to come in because they don't have to have land and they don't have to have their own facilities in the area. This was a key component to us being able to put out a bid to be able to receive more options and more individuals who'd be interested in our bid. And so this is something else that we have also put into this RFP. Now, the next slide talks a little bit about now what we were able to do with the RFP. One, it had to be reviewed by the state, which, as we talked about earlier and I shared with the board earlier, it was reviewed and approved by the state before we post. The next one is we did something specific in here about reducing. We wanted to reduce our costs and have more of a ability to project what our costs would be. And in doing so, we wanted to separate our route costs from fixed costs. So as we potentially looked at reducing due to our student
Route
reduction.
cost versus fixed cost is what
Correct.
you said, correct? Okay.
Yep. Now, the route costs, we know that we're in a state of flux with our district. As we've looked at the last 10 years, we've had a depreciating amount of students attending the district. We've also had a drop in participants, particularly since COVID, of amount of students who ride the bus. So our student participation in transportation has dropped. So one of those things that we wanted to look at is if we have either increase or decrease in the future, that we would be able to project those costs a little bit more fluidly for the district. The fixed costs were something that we wanted to take out. Again, the fixed costs have lots of different tangibles that are inside of them. That those are the costs that are associated with management positions. Those are your infrastructure components. Those are your staffing that you have to have that are non-transportation providers. They're not your bus drivers. So any of those types of things, mechanics, they're all included in those fixed costs. We did have a fairly robust appendix. I provided you a copy of that appendix. It's Appendix B. The whole first section talks about those items that are included in fixed costs and differentiating out the expenses of where those would be in the RFP. So it's a fairly robust document. Now, again, the other component, again, just for knowing that what lengths we went to, we were looking at state reimbursement opportunities as part of the RFP. And that's why we also separated out the route costs and the fixed costs. Those are also different opportunities for the districts to procure a different level of reimbursement off of both of those as well.
They're
Again,
also a good way to help us scale what we're doing.
it does.
I mean, when you pull that out, it really helps us to see and scale the cost. So
Correct.
bravo, I like things to be that clear when it comes to finances.
And again, this is something that we found in other districts that was not uncommon that they had put into their RFPs as well. For some of the reasons that we've already stated. One, it provided opportunities to recoup reimbursement money that we may not have had access to. And two, to project and predict what our costs would be, whether we went up in busing or whether we went down in busing. It gave us good, solid numbers to be able to project that. Tyler, go ahead with the next one, please. Now, just as a reminder, before we start talking about the actual bids that we received, this is the Idaho code. It's 672806, and this is section 2A. In the purchase or lease shall be made pursuant to an open competitive sealed bid process with the procurement to be made from the qualified bidder submitting the lowest bid price, complying with the bidding procedures and meeting the specifications for the service sought to be procured. This is actually from our attorney, and so just wanted to make sure that we put that baseline when we start talking about the actual bids themselves. This is the part of the rules that we have to follow. Questions up to that point in time?
Trustees, any questions so far?
I have
Trustee
a que-
Ben?
Oh, sorry, yeah, just for clarification, because I think I'm following, but I just want to
Sure.
make sure. So the fact that we have the transportation manager position allows us another opportunity to get a different level of reimbursement from the state for these transportation costs. The procurement of in-district software allows for an additional avenue of reimbursement that from the state. You said that the separation of the two, the fixed versus the routing, will also allow us to have another avenue or increase the reimbursement level. Correct? Are there any other reimbursement opportunities that you mentioned that I missed?
Not to this point in time.
Okay.
You've done a good job.
Okay.
I would add, Trustee Benz, to your one comment about the software. The other purpose that we wanted to have the software and bring that into house is it gave us more control over the routes. Then that was one of the things that we started out with, that we wanted to have more emphasis and more ability to change those routes or add routes.
And is that just so that we can be more responsive, more fluid responsive to the needs of our patrons? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Chair Taylor, Trustee Binns, one of the things we did when we discussed other school districts is that when they had control over routes, it made them a little bit more responsive to the needs and are able to make adjustments based on some of the finances and things that they needed to do. So it was just a more efficient way to operate after speaking with them.
Okay, now we'll go back. The good news. We did have two bids that came in, and both were underneath our threshold of that $8 million budget that we have. And so that's the good news.
I feel like you should pause for a second. I could give you a moment of silence if you would like. No, or you could continue, but go ahead.
That's great news right there. We can
Got
just
it.
relish in that. Yeah.
Chair Taylor, Trustees, it is really important because remember how many changes we had to do.
We do.
How many difficult decisions we had to do to get ourselves within budget and to have the concern of being millions of dollars over our allocated budget. To be under our $8 million budget is really good news. I think that's a really positive thing. And the things that we have done in the RFP, I think, helped bring that cost down so that the bids did come in under.
I hear a but coming.
But before we go to that, but I do want to point out that it coming in under what was originally anticipated does meet the need that we had. And I don't think that this is anything different than other businesses are doing in our community with rising costs. Okay. Any other questions, trustees?
All right. So the next slide we have, I want to talk a little bit about a particular part of the bidding process. And this is one of our mandatory and evaluated components, which is our bid pricing guide. The bid pricing guide is what determined and brought us the information of how much the actual contracts were being bid at.
And could I look at that in this packet? Or does this go out and does it come back?
Yeah, we're going to show
Great.
you those as well.
Thank you.
Chair Taylor, excuse me. When you said the RFP was reviewed by the State Department of Education or State Department of Purchasing or what?
Great question. It's mandated that we have to take it to the State Department of Education, the Transportation Department.
Okay.
Let me see.
So at this time, I'm going to ask Tyler to bring up our generic form for our bidding process. As he's doing so, yeah, it should be. As he's looking for it, there's a lot of documents, as you can tell. There's even in the bid responses, there was over 200 pages that came from the contractors that were bidding. Lots of information to process. But the one, again, the reason why I wanted to point out the pricing one, because that's what tells us where and how much the company is going to charge us. And so that's the big piece. We did look through each one of those. There was 3 tabs that we had put into the spreadsheet for the companies to fill out. The first one dealt with the routes themselves. Again, remember that separation between routing and fixed cost. So the first page was built for them to be able to enter in. And here's an example right now of one of the ones that we received from Brown Bus. So the first tab is basically where they would enter in the information to provide the per route busing costs. Up at the tabs, we'll give you some more information of each one of those, but the bottom left-hand or bottom right-hand corner, my right-hand corner, I think it's your right-hand corner as well, provides the overall cost. Now, the second tab is where you would find the fixed cost component, and that's where we asked them to be specific. And as you can see in here, it was for Appendix B is where they would find that information. And then you have Table C, which is a summary of all of those numbers to give us our grand total costs. Now, going through there, I know there's questions, but I want to make sure we talk about each one of the tabs first.
Is this the same document that is linked in the Nampa School District Demand Star thing?
So in Demand Star, you can find all of these documents, yes. There's several documents in
I'm
there.
just asking because I'm unable to access those ones, so I just want to know if I'm looking at this, I don't need to worry about this.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Go for it.
So in the documents, again, just for transparency, and I think it's good for the public to know that they can access all of these documents through our procurement site, which is called Demand Star. It is out there. It's a free site for people to be able to log into and to be able to look at any of the procurement processes that the district has. It's the same one that we use for our food nutrition services and our IT services, and in this case, we used it for our transportation
So
services.
another level of transparency. Great.
All the documents are open. Any of the updates that we did and all the processes, it's out there for anybody to be able to look at as well. So I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So in the worksheet, as we looked at the worksheets, the bidders were asked to fill out each one of those forms and provide us so that we would have an overall cost to be able to compare. We're going to start by showing both of our bidders and what they provided for us. Tyler, if you could go ahead and go to First Students.
And I'm going to ask you just to wait until it's up in front of us to start the speaking, just so that we're
Absolutely.
with you. Okay. And
I might give you
it up.
just a little bit of things to look for as you
Perfect.
start looking at it,
That'd be
but
great.
totally understand you're going to need some time to look at it. As Tyler brings it up, one thing that I shared that there was 3 separate tabs to be able to fill out the information required for the fulfillment of the bidding process. You'll find in this one, as we're showing you right now, the line items on the left were provided, and the white columns up front were also provided by the district. The blue is where the companies were able to fill in and get their information. And the other ones were just calculations that were formulas in the spreadsheet.
Trustees, do you guys have any questions on Big Guide 1?
Oh, I thought you said big guy.
Big
Big
Guide.
89 cents, is that pretty typical for excess mile rates?
That's what they bid. And we'll show you what the next
Okay.
ones look like, right?
Yeah,
As
I
we
know.
go through this one, I'd also like to share that there's some more detail that was also added subsequent to this from first students. So Tyler, you could show page 2. So essentially what they did is they filled out our form and then provided some additional information in the notes as well. So this is the same page that you saw before, but they added some additional notes that you'll find on the right-hand side as far as comments.
Oh. What
Can you blow
is-
that up?
Tyler, are you able to make that bigger at all? I think that's-
First of all, let me apologize for my bad eyes, but I just want to that was the bottom. I just wanted to read that bottom sentence. Thank you.
And the 2-hour minimum call out charge, that's, you're being charged for a 2-hour trip, whether you like it or not. That's the minimum, right?
That's what they're
that
proposing their
means?
bid.
Okay, thank you.
But they're also proposing their bid also includes a 5-day work week, even though we're on a 4-day work week. Correct?
And you'll find that I think that's fairly common between
Okay.
both contracts. Part of that is retaining employees.
Yeah, it says the
Sure.
wage structure is essentially.
But that's on their end, though.
It is.
I mean,
but
I understand where they're coming from, but that's on their end.
It is on there. It was not something that we
Okay.
put in on our end or we discussed at all.
Okay.
Understood. And since we'll see that on both bids, makes sense. But then my question would be, then do we have driving privileges on Friday?
Right.
That's what I would ask, right?
Right. Does it double dip, right? That field trip or activity
Yeah,
trip?
in
does
my
that-
opinion, then does it double dip for the payment of our drivers since they're paid for? those
Essentially-
5 days per week?
Excuse me.
Essentially, they'd be on call Friday if we need a bus at a certain location to run down to the Boys and Girls Club or something like that. I mean, is that something that's,
I think that's something that we would need to clarify and work out as we move through it. Because in the bid, we did not put parameters as far as the days. We told them we're a 4-day work week, but in both bids, I believe the idea was to keep their employees whole.
Whole, right. I guess what I'm saying is that
Yep.
then my assumption would be that we wouldn't have a cost for the driver for a Friday, but my understanding would be that we didn't bid the use of the bus for a Friday. Am I correct? So the only thing that they're keeping whole or charging us for is that rate of pay.
Correct.
Everything else would be an additional cost, like if we were going to drive on Fridays, but they
Yeah.
want to pay their staff for 5 days.
oh, how good is a driver if you have a bus?
Well, what good is a bus if you don't have any drivers?
Well, they
if you
have
only
a
4
they're-
days of work.
They're paying their drivers for 5 days.
Oh, right, but I mean, to
Oh,
pick up on what Chair Taylor was saying. So if they're trying to retain the drivers and keep them, pay them for 5 days,
sure.
but.
Then they should be available to the district. And you're saying that that's something that could be negotiated if one of these bids was accepted. and-
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, I think it's a good conversation we need to have with that. But noticing how they both bid in the same capacity, it's a conversation.
Well, definitely, since we
Nonetheless.
don't know what that Friday's gonna look like. I mean, there's still a lot of up in the air of what those kids are gonna be doing and where they're gonna be at and how do they get them from point A to point B and so on and so on. If we're paying that cost for the 5th day anyways, I think that's something that we include.
Next.
So again, the next thing you'll notice is the Form B from, again, this is for students. We're going to go to the second page, which is the fixed cost guide. You'll notice here that it was a relatively simple formula. They entered in the information for their fixed costs here. You can see that's 230. Let's see how good my eyes are. 236. I think it said
230.
230. There you go. Thanks, Tyler. My eyes are not what they used to be. And then as well in this part, they did do a breakdown in the next page of what that cost was. And so if you scroll to the next page, they broke down according to Appendix B. They took each one of those items and then gave a line item for each one of those costs over the course of 12 months and how they got to their total amount.
I just want to say chef's kiss of bids. And I only say this because I love detailed things. So regardless of what goes on here, I think anybody who's bidding us, I particularly like the more detailed something is, it eases our understanding of what we're paying for and it helps us to mitigate our expectations. So I just, these these clear bids are very helpful.
So on, Chair Taylor, on that note, with the clarification, and I'm so sorry, Courtney, but if you could go back to the previous slide we just had, I just had another clarifying question on the 4-day versus 5-day. So the bid came in for the 5-day cost. That was to keep their staff whole. I get that. Does that cost also include on here somewhere that 5th day for miles or gas or anything like that? Or is it just their staff? Or do we know that yet?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, the way that we bid this was based off of the routes running. So we didn't, we told them that there was a 4-day.
So since no routes on Friday, their bid came in, the bids came
The
in.
bids came in based
with
off of
just-
routes.
With just to make that 5th day their staff.
I believe that that's how, in having several discussions, I believe that that's how they did it internally. It's not documented that it's 5 days. I think they did that to keep people whole
And then pointed it out, so
and
would we
pointed
be
it out
aware
as
of
a
why the labor was.
clarification.
So there certainly could be some extra charges in there because they were only bidding on the 4-day on the routes.
So they know that they were bidding on a 4-day work week.
But if we say, hey, the drivers are we're paying for the drivers on the 5th day and we need a bus here or there or wherever, that the bus itself could be an extra expense for the district. Does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Chair Taylor,
I think
Trustee
I
Kirkman,
haven't stuck on
I'm
the
trying
5th day.
to,
I know, I think
interpret.
it's me, and I'm so sorry. Again, it was reading that last line. The way that I'm interpreting this is that they're pointing out that they're going to keep their staff whole, that
Mhm.
there's not any other cost incurred. So that if we wanted a bus on Friday, we would have to pay for the bus. But my question would be, but my labor is already paid for. So my understanding is we have an extra day of labor only, and that they've bid everything else on the use of the bus while in use during the routes, correct? I think I derailed that conversation for you because I think they pointed it out because the labor is excessive to 5 and everything else is in that 4-day
So
route.
again, we're just gonna have to flesh that out.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about the potential
Understood.
for extra
Same,
costs.
same.
The extra costs that we don't know about. That's what
Yeah.
that's what I'm worried about.
And Chair
Okay.
Taylor and Trustee Kirkman, again, our purpose was to be able to have a lot of more transparency as far as how much our routes were cost. So that's
Yeah.
why this is broken down by the routes. And you look at the additional costs on those are typically above and beyond your general routes. So if we're asking for a field trip, those are billed out and they always have been, and they build out at a different rate. And they've always been that way. So it isn't necessarily an apples for apples as you're trying to
Sure.
share that. It's, hey, we have bus drivers on demand because we're already paying for them. We did not set it up for that. That's how the bid came back to us, is they incorporate the cost. They're still only bidding off of 4 days.
Got it.
But they incorporated the cost of the
They did
labor for the
incorporate the
5th day.
cost to be able to keep people whole in that is what it gives the appearance of.
Well, and that's actually, yeah.
So in that mind, I think it's a retention component,
Yeah.
trying to keep their bus drivers.
That's what I was
and
gonna
keep-
say. It's actually a smart move
Yeah.
because how hard is it to get bus drivers
Correct.
when the schools are open?
So I think if I get back to your original answer, I believe the way that I would answer this, Trustee Kirkman, is that when you have additional outside the general school travel, which we identified as a 4-day, there are going to be those costs, which are defined here as activity trips. And we have the definition of how much those will cost to the district. Now, those do vary depending upon student activities, but I also think that those are not going to be as many other than the sports component. That's mostly where we're going to see that come into play, which we already do already. It's a current cost that we typically have for any of our sports activities.
Right. Understand. Thank
Sports
you.
or meaning athletics
Sure,
or
anything
activities
outside is-
costs. Yep.
The normal school day.
Correct.
Right. Which Friday would be outside
Outside
that
the normal school day.
So, okay.
So we did define those 4 days in the contract.
Thank you.
Now, again, I'll go back. If we go to page, keep scrolling down just so I can show you the bid documents as they came in. This was for the fixed costs. And the third page, or the last part, was the bid total of what it came into and what the actual part was that we compare, which is that I know it says grant. You can make all of your jokes right now. That's one that I missed. It says grant instead of grand. I do apologize, but grant total means grand total.
Oh, I was actually looking. That's pretty good, another
Yeah.
grant.
My apologies on that one. There are some clerical errors inside of this due to the speed at which we got it out.
Like, where's his $7 million grant?
Yeah,
Courtney was
right.
telling us
You were
about.
getting excited. So I do need to clarify that. So in this case, the first bid was for the $7,081,696.31 for an annual contract. Now, a part we did put into this was a bid performance bond that in the event that something happened in the middle of the contract, that the district would have some recourses with that bid bond or the performance bond to be able to recoup some of the finances as if anything did happen during the duration. And again, this is something fairly typical of contracts of this size. And we found that throughout the valley as well.
So I'm sorry, do you mind if I ask you? Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say performance bond, you mean if the expectations are not meet, this is our exit clause, or or we hold back? What does that performance bond mean?
Yeah.
What is, yeah.
Chair Teeler, Trustee Benz, what it means is that basically if there's any reason for performance and or if the company that we're contracting decides to break the contract, we have a bond that protects the district and gives them some money as an ability to procure new services or do whatever they need to do with to be able to help those services. So it's a pretty typical when you get into very large contracts to have something like this built in. And you see it a lot in construction. We do it a ton in construction. We do it with all of our facilities that we're putting together as we require performance bonds as part of that.
Thank you.
So again, this is the total amount from for students.
One question on that bond, is that reoccurring every year or is that just this?
It's
first
the
year?
5-year.
Oh, for the contract.
It's for the
Okay.
contract. Yeah. And Tyler will go ahead if scroll down if there's, I don't think there's any more on that page. And then we'll now move to the second bid, which we received from Brown Bus Company, and I'll walk you through this sheet as well. Again, here, very familiar, now that you've seen it a couple times, this is the route portion, the first tab, which is the bid guide 1. This has all the route information. You notice in here that it has a yellow box there. That yellow box was an a la carte item that we made an amendment to from the original contract that Brown Bus did incorporate in there. So that is at the district desire to have that or not, that bid actually would go down $55,000 if we elected not to have that service. So I just wanted to make sure I clarified that point, and that was part of an amendment that we did put out.
Did First Student incorporate the a la carte in their bid?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, they did not.
And that excess mile rate was 0.89 in the first bid.
Correct.
And then, okay,
So before, I know you're gonna start have a lot of questions. I think as we finish through, it will help answer some of those questions that you may have.
go for it.
One thing I do want to bring your attention to that caused us a little bit of unclarity. If you look at the shuttles, there is a $0 amount that's identified in this bid for transferring our students from schools to schools. Just want to make sure that was one thing that we pointed out that caused us some clarity issues.
Mr. Stauffer, let me stop you for just a second. Trustees, would it help for you to have these bids side by side?
Yeah, because
Can
I
I
was just
instruct
gonna
Clerk
ask.
Lamont? Okay, I'm just gonna, just for trustees reference, guys, because this is material that we need to go through. I'm gonna quickly take a break. I'm gonna ask that we print these bids out so we are just having a hard time seeing them is really the problem.
Absolutely.
And I think it's gonna lead to many more questions. So if we can get both of these printed and Clerk Lamont, so we will need 5 copies of each for a side-by-side comparison. Am I asking for too much?
No, I just don't
Okay.
have it.
Nope.
So the
We'll get it.
Can we do that really quick? And then we'll have you proceed. We just
Yep.
can't see, and it's just, I don't want to make it harder, and we're going through so much information. I just want to make sure we can read it and follow you. Perfect.
Yep.
So for everybody, we're just going to take a 5-minute break so that can happen without it feeling awkward. All right, we will now resume our special board meeting. It is 6:29 PM.
All right, so I think you now have the documents in hand. So we're looking at bid 2, page 1.
Okay.
And so that on the screen should be something similar to what you're looking at in your hand. Hopefully we're on the same page.
It is the exact same.
All right,
Bid 2, brown bus, right?
correct. Bid 2 is brown bus.
Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so we were just talking about, again, one of the things that drew our attention was the shuttle busing and the $0 amount that was associated to it. Now I'm going to jump through and go to the second tab, which is the bid sheet guide 2. And this was, if you recall, the fixed costs. In the fixed costs in this bid, we had $0 that were entered in for the fixed cost.
That seems like they,
And we'll come back and I'll define some more. I just want to get through the spreadsheet. We'll come back
Yep,
to
thank
that as well.
Was there a breakdown similar to in bid 1?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So in tab 3, which is the overall bid, we want to bring your attention to their grant, again, not the grant total, but the grand total that was presented here. And Tyler, if you could blow that up a little bit larger, so as I read it, my eyes don't deceive me.
Am I reading that right? That bond is 30 million?
No. Okay. Looking at it right now. So the overall grand total, oh, and he's actually in the spreadsheet. There you go. He fixed it for me. Grand total is $6,431,121 for their total annual bid. So that you have the ability to look at the two totals, and that would be the line item to look at would be the grand totals for Brown Bus was 6.4. And then, there's lots of questions. So,
Well, my question really is Jason's question.
Yes.
It's just such a dramatic difference between the bid bond totals. Why
not
is that?
there's not a period in the wrong.
Are you sure
I'll have
that
to
it's
look at it.
supposed to be a 354,000 versus a 30 million?
yeah, I'll get into that. I don't know the answer to that right now, but
Okay.
let me look at that in just a
Okay.
second.
Okay.
So the bid bond piece, that number is not something that is causing an impact for the total amount. That's again, something that's held in reserve if there is an event that takes place that separates the contract. So that's in the district's favor. So that dollar amount is not something that is, you need to be concerned about as part of the bid. It's just something that was a total for the company to ensure that they had the performance bond that equated to the overall contract. So remember this part of the bond. Yep. So we'll come back and I'll
Hold on,
talk
I
about
don't
that a
know
little
who
bit
this
later.
Yeah, we can't have you talk unless you're right here.
So I'll answer that question
Okay.
for you here in a second when I look at the spreadsheet.
Okay,
So the next piece that I want to go back to, because I know you have some questions, and I'm going to, in your packet as well that I provided you, there's a document that was a part of the initial bid for Brown Bus. And in that document, it has Brown Bus at the top. It's addressed to me. I'd like you to look, I think it's at page 3. There's some parts that I did highlight in there. And this is in direct correlation to the second spreadsheet that you saw. What Brown Bus did is that they incorporated, by what they have in their document, they incorporated all the fixed costs into their bus routing costs.
This came in with the bid.
It did. So there's some highlighted components to that. And so this is the explanation for why you're seeing zeros in that column. Now, again, the one of our concerns is that this was not how we had asked for the bid to be broken down.
Sorry, Chair Taylor.
wait 1 second. Mr. Stoffer, because there is so much to get through, are you finished? Are you ready for our questions? Okay.
There-
Trustees, really quick. I'm just going to ask if we can, by all means, write the questions. And what I don't want you to do is get 10 slides ahead of us, because then I feel like we're going to be backtracking. So at 3 slides, can you pause for questions?
Mhm.
Thank you, sir.
But I also think questions are relevant as.
I do too.
presenting them, so
I
that we
just-
Can have that.
I agree. I'm just trying to let you finish a thought. So do you want to take some questions now? Since we have had a mandated the chair paused us to ask these questions, so maybe it's a good time
So-
and then we can go back in.
Chair Taylor, I'm here to try to do the best I can for you. I
Same.
think there's some things that we'd still like to show, but if there's questions that are pertinent you want to ask, it might lead me to those other things that I was going to. So it's up to the board's purview how you want to do that.
Okay.
I'll do whatever you want.
I think for the sake of making sure we stay on the same page, I'm going to try to take a couple of questions that if we get too far down the rabbit
Mhm.
hole, and I feel like, do you have multiple more slides?
We're almost to the end.
But-
Okay,
But Courtney's also in a good position to say, let me answer that in
the next
Mhm.
slide. Yeah, I would agree too. So if it's coming, let us know that we're going to get
Sure.
to that if that's the track it goes on, and if it's not
Absolutely.
relevant, and I will help corral that way. But if not, I'm going to open up questions just
Mm-hmm.
momentarily. Trustee Kirkman.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. So the fixed costs that's highlighted on page 3 here from this bid, we don't know what those are. I mean, they're not itemized as the other bid was itemized a little bit more, correct? It just says, if desired, we can move selected fixed costs out of the daily rate and bill them separately. So the fixed costs are in the daily rate, but do we know what those specific costs are?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, that is the question. One of the things for clarity's sake, though, too, is the line item was not a prerequisite of the bid. The fixed cost was in relationship to Appendix B. So first students did itemize that. That was not the initial cost in the RFP. However, what was asked in the RFP spreadsheet is to enter in that fixed cost.
And that was an ME.
It's an ME.
And then
Trustee
And
Finn.
clarity in ME is mandatory and evaluated. That's what ME means.
Okay, Trustee Benz.
And I apologize, I did not get the opportunity to digest this entire appendix B. It's a little lengthy. Was it clearly defined within this appendix B, which was part of the bid, what should be considered a fixed cost for the purposes of the bid on that tab?
Trustee Taylor, Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, Appendix B is what was defined in Hall Section 1 were those costs, where we
Okay.
delineated positions, we delineated external costs, all those were in Appendix B, and you do have Appendix B in front of you. And it's about 40 pages, 33 pages of information.
Okay, and so it should be, there should be no confusion as to what a fixed cost is versus a route cost for the purposes of the bid, correct?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, that is our understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Taylor, trustees, it may be helpful to know, again, that question that you just asked, Trustee Benz, that is something that the companies could have asked the district. The district was available to answer any clarifying questions about the RFP. We did respond to numerous questions from numerous vendors about how to include the costs and how the RFP was designed for it. So that opportunity was there.
Okay. Trustees, any more questions, or shall I ask Mr. Stafford to go ahead and continue?
Sorry, are you going to talk separately about the highlighting further on in this document, or is now the opportunity?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, the highlighted components are also a component of explanations from Brown Bus about the fixed cost components. So I highlighted that for ease of the board to understand the position that Brown Bus had taken when they put together their bid.
Then do you mind if I ask another?
Nope, go for it.
So on page, I want to say 4 is the next page after the highlighted section that is entitled fixed costs. It has pricing, and it has, we will credit the district 50% of the route rate for any reduction in the number of routes below the number of routes listed in the bidding guide. Could you explain that to me a little bit better?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, it would be difficult for me. I'm going to tell you how I interpret it, and that's the
Okay.
best that I can do
Okay.
because that's how the bids were presented to
Okay.
us. So my take on that is that roughly 50% of the costs are fixed costs.
Understood, which is why
They
we were
would
asking
retain
for them
50.
separate.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Our purpose was to separate the two so that we knew what were fixed costs and what were bus route costs.
And I'm sorry, to speak to that, I think we have to be very careful because we're at some point maybe speaking for either of these companies. We want to be careful about that.
Right.
If the information's not there, the information's not there.
Correct. And so again, Trustee Taylor and Trustee Sue, I'm telling you my interpretation of that. That's why I phrased it that. That's my interpretation.
And just so that I'm 100% understanding all of the components and the requests, the way that the bid was requested, it should have been, these are the flexible costs associated with the route. So if we add a route or we reduce a route, it's all of the costs associated with those changes are the route stuff. And the things that cannot change, personnel, equipment, the ones that you're not going to be adding ad hoc that you're planning for long-term, those are the fixed costs. And therefore, if we add a route, we should not incur an additional fixed route unless we do have to get another bus or something, 10 routes or something. But a single route or two should not impact materials, correct?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, that is our interpretation as well.
Thank you.
And that's the purpose of why we put the bid out in such a format. Again, there's precedence for this as well. This is not something that we conjured up independently. We worked with several districts. We've worked with several other RFPs, and these are similar items that are found in many different RFPs throughout the valley.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Chair, I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
Is it, this is new, but so I'm just trying to understand, is it standard for us to be charged for a 12-month when we're realistically on 10 months? I mean, right, you've got 2 months, 2 solid months of no busing.
Yeah, Chair Taylor, Trustee Sue. Basically, it comes as we provide the service. So it's not cut out over 12 months. There are some things that do procure throughout that, depending on how much services we use over the summer. Sometimes we have activity buses that are used during the summer, and so those will get billed separately and out. But it's billed per month and our usage per month. That's how it's used. So it's not a 12-month, cut it in 12 equal payments. That's not how a busing contract works. There's lots of different variables that come to that.
Okay. And then the second question is, a lot of information here. What are the annual percentage increases? Are there fixed increases, or how does that look like?
Trustee Taylor, Chair Taylor, Trustee Sue. Yes, in our RFP packet, it did describe that CPI minus gasoline component would be our average rate. We also put stipulations as a limit and a max as well. So our limit, the lowest it could be is 2%, the highest it could be is 5%. But inside of that window with our CPI calculations would be how that number would be determined on a yearly basis. And there's actually dates that are identified in there. And that's, again, pretty standard throughout busing transportation
Well,
contracts.
really with all contracts.
Correct.
Point of clarification, can I just have you define CPI?
Consumer Price Index. Basically, it's a conglomerate of a lot of things, including your yearly increase in cost for your cost of living. It has it has gas prices in it. There's a lot of different variables. You can actually go to the several websites that will give you a good breakdown of what's included and how they configure that.
Understood.
Inflation.
Yeah, inflation is definitely part of that.
Sorry. And then again, just because this is new to me, this type of bid, it is a 5-year contract. However, costs of, consumer price index, et cetera, gas, volatile prices are allowed for, in addition to, but the price that is on the bid guide 1 sheet is the anticipated cost per year over the 5 years of the contract, excluding the volatile prices. Is that correct?
Trustee Taylor, Trustee Benz, yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to let you finish your presentation.
Yeah, I got some questions too, but go ahead.
So if
Chair
you're
Taylor,
ready to
Trustees,
proceed.
we're getting pretty close to the end of my component. I know there's probably more questions, and you have been leading to my next slide, so very well done. So one of the things that we did at this point in time, because we've shown you some of the concerns that we had, we did work with our legal team and review each of the documents. And one of the challenges that we do have is that we do feel that we have a non-responsive bid due to the variables that were not included in the bid that allow us to accurately determine the actual value of the contract for bid number 2. And so with that, I'm sure you have more questions, but that was the last piece I wanted to present to you.
Okay, okay, great. Trustees, do we have any questions additionally for Mr. Stoffer now that he's finished with the presentation? Trustee Kirkman?
Yeah, Chair
And then I'm going to
Taylor.
move directly over to
He's
trustee.
gonna ask it. so
Okay.
we are,
Okay,
Page 4 of this document, you have highlighted pricing. I think it's page 4, yeah. Right before that highlighted, the second bullet, it says the performance bond is 96.9. Is that what we're looking at instead of 30 million? We're looking at about
That's the yearly.
484,000 for the 5-year contract.
Yeah, per year.
Which seems more in line
Yeah.
with the other, seems more in line than 30 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
just
and
wanted-
again, I'll come back and look at that. I need to go open it up and
That's all
take a look at it.
That's all right. Just wanted-
is that your question?
That was not.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
trustee
Thanks, Jeff.
Jennings.
Chair Taylor, I guess it's my understanding on bid 1, we do see a fixed cost. And that's kind of what they're anticipating on an annual basis. We don't see that, but there will be potentially costs that are just not noted, correct? Is that how I'm understanding that?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Jennings, that's the question that we're unsure of how the bid was put together. Now, if you look at the front page that we showed you from Brown Bus, they say that that's included in their bus route costs. But again, we wanted those separate. That was the major point, because we wanted those separate.
And, sorry, trustee Benz. And Dr. Russell, did I see that you had a comment over there?
Chair Taylor, trustees, I don't have a comment at this point.
Okay. So, Mr. Stoffer, and to understand this, the reason that we needed to itemize our cost was for that rebate, the state, we were trying to scale it for those reimbursements to help get those costs. So the reason we did this was to scale it.
Chair Taylor, yes, that is the reason why. Going back to our original components of our mission of what we were trying to accomplish with the RFP, that was the reason why we had these separated out.
Okay, and so what I just heard you say, and I just want for point of clarification, is by law, we have to take the lowest bid, but what I heard you say is that you believe that one of the bids is not even qualified.
Correct. As we visit with our legal team, that was the recommendation that they provided us.
Well, Chair Taylor, comment on that.
Please.
How can we know what's the lowest bid if one bid has zeros in shuttle, in the fixed cost, 0 in shuttles? I mean, I personally just don't know what the total cost of that of bid number 2 is.
Yeah, so will you walk me through just so that I understand those disqualifications very clearly?
Yes.
So the fixed cost I heard.
So Chair Taylor, again, the 2 areas that we identified earlier, one was the area of shuttles where there was no monetary value associated or aggregate amount that was associated in that bid sheet, which provided us a 0 charge. There's a couple ways to interpret that.
One second before you interpret, and point of clarification, because I didn't see it. There was no yellow highlighted discussion on shuttles.
Correct.
So we mentioned shuttles here, but there was nothing that talked about shuttles. And in reference to shuttles, we are talking about
Which is,
our daily shuttling.
we're going to need
That's accurate.
Well, which we have to have.
That's
We
a
went 4
requirement.
days. Yeah. The whole purpose
Yeah.
of 4 days CTE, we got to have shuttles. Okay,
Chair Taylor-
understood. So we have no cost understood of shuttles.
Correct.
Okay, now keep going. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something.
And Chair Taylor, to add to that, one of the reasons why this is also important is because of our new trimester schedule. We actually have more shuttles that will be taking place throughout the day.
So we don't know what the shuttle cost would be. Trimester shuttles, okay? And then the second
And the
was
second point was the fixed
fixed
cost,
cost
as
for
we've
the
been talking
scaling,
about.
which we all know I'm in love with because I talk about it all the time. Okay, those were my 2 questions there for the Brown bus bid. Any other questions there?
no, I may have some comments later.
Okay, so
Sorry, Madam Chair, I do have a
Please.
question. So please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Stoffer, we don't have to take the lowest bid, right? I think our legal counsel pointed out, like, it's a bigger package. The price is probably the heaviest weight, but there are other factors that we do need to look at as well.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Sue, that is not correct. The way that this was designed was for the lowest responsive bid. And that's the language of the contract, or that we
but what I
received.
hear you saying is one of the bids is not qualified. What I hear you saying is that based on how we went out,
Mhm.
what you're saying is that this lacks the information needed, so it's not a qualified. bid.
Tyler, would you mind putting up the code again?
Trustees, Chair Taylor, trustees, in the code, there is subsection I, and it says the following: if the governing board of any political subdivision chooses to award a competitively bid contract involving the procurement of personal property or services to a bidder other than the apparent low bidder, the political subdivision shall declare its reasons or reasons on the record and shall communicate such reasons or reasons in writing to all that have submitted the competitive bid. So the answer is you can choose something other than the lower bid, but you got to give justification or reasons for that.
And what I hear you saying is it's because this one doesn't comply with the RFP.
Correct.
Is that what I hear everybody saying?
Please put that up.
Okay, trustee Ben.
So again, if I may clarify just one more time, and this is the code. Right here is the code that we have been utilizing as part of it as well. Complying with bidding procedures and meeting the specifications for the service sought to be procured. In this definition that is part of the code, there are two pieces to our bid that were not completed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then just for clarification, that same code, subsection I, is the one that Mr. Russell, Superintendent Russell just read about awarding the bid
okay.
But that,
Same.
and identifying it if it deemed necessary to go with a different bidder.
but that is only if you have multiple parties who meet this part,
Correct.
section A.
This is the first
Okay.
subsection. So you,
And it would appear, based on what has been submitted, that only one of the bids actually does all of the things that are being demonstrated on the screen right now, that are being shown on the screen right now, which means we do not have more than one qualified bid.
Okay, trustees, questions there, comments there?
Yeah, Chair Taylor, my comment is that, if bids come before us to make a decision, they need to be complete, no zeros. We need to know what the costs are going to be as much as possible, especially when we're trying to fit this within our budget. And I'm just not satisfied that bid 2 meets those standards. Especially if the shuttles in the first bid are 640,000 and nothing in bid 2. And then the fixed cost, in my experience with things like this, you don't put a fixed cost in a bid and say, let's talk about it later of what those costs might be.
Yeah.
That just doesn't sit with me. So personally, I think there's one bid that fits what we need. It fits the legal, from where I see it, the legal requirements of the process and comes within budget.
Okay, trustees, other questions or comments? I much agree that I would have a difficult time looking at this and feeling like I could make a choice when I don't have all the information. So I do feel like we do have one disqualified bid. Questions here? Comments down here? Questions, comments down here? And I have another question outside of this. So if we're done here, I have a question looking at these bids. So I stand with what I said. So now I'm back to our first bid. How often do we use these excess hour rates?
Chair Taylor, trustees, we use them quite frequently in our past contract. We have done some modifications in it, particularly with the time. Our allocation in the previous contract was 4 hours. In this one, it was 4.5 hours before access hours kicked in. We tried to look at the average time it was taking for those to take place. So we did our best to do that, but that changes also with the amount of routes and how long it takes to get from one side of town to the other. So the timing of it and the mileage of it is in there on purpose. And that's, again, most contracts are scheduled that way.
Understood, and it is. And hear me when I say that this looks good. And my assumption would be is that their hours may be high because they're trying to recoup a workforce. But when we look at those access hour rates, they are much higher on this bid, which now I just have one bid. So understood. I just need to understand the impact of this when I look at this, only because, again, my assumption would be that labor, right, especially in Idaho, especially in some of your West Coast states, I mean, it has just skyrocketed. So I hear it, but I would like to understand how this impacts me, because when I'm looking at the bids, and this is what's unfortunate about seeing two bids, and again, our excess mileage rate comes in low. So I get this is not an apples to oranges comparison, but I am wanting to understand because now I'm not coming in at $48, I'm coming in at $78, which is $30 more. And it just gives me hives. And so, and I start to feel like I can't breathe, but just because I saw a number on a paper.
So Chair Taylor, to put it in perspective, it is something in our previous contract that we did see some access hours. That's why, again, we added the half hour to help accommodate for that.
Because you said
In most of our routes, as they're currently constituted, that fulfilled that need to not have to activate those hours as frequently. Are we going to have to activate them? There are going to be some unforeseeable traffic
Understood.
patterns. There's going to be things that happen that unavoidably are going to take place. But we did take precautions in looking and analyzing our historical data and increasing the amount of time that was placed into those instead of the 4.5.
Well, and correct me too if I'm wrong, now that we've scaled it to this level, my assumption would be too, is that there's a lot more metrics that you're going to be able to keep your eye on over these next few years. And then we would probably rescale this project altogether.
Chair
after the
Taylor,
5 years.
that's the idea. And that's
Okay.
again why we went to such lengths to make this as detailed as possible so that we would have more ability to predict
Yeah.
and to project,
Yep.
and then also to respond quicker.
Yes. And that was my final question regarding these. Trustee Benz.
Yeah, and then I guess it does have the base miles and hours defined in the first column. And so my assumption is that if we go over the base, then, the base hours, then we are into the excess hours. But is that total for the week, how do we know when we've hit it and how do we know when we've gone over? Is it like, it doesn't matter if you've only worked 20 hours this week, if you've gone more than 8 hours, you get overtime? What is that? How does that?
Because we have such extra labor, they want to talk to us about it and it's negotiable and we won't hit access rates because we pay for Fridays. I'm just throwing that out there in case
Well,
anybody's listening.
So
Yeah, but I'm just wondering what triggers
I
that
agree.
excess hours?
I agree.
That's all I'm
That's a
trying to
good
understand.
question too.
So,
So Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, either could trigger it. That's why they're both there.
Mhm.
Is that if it's more time, even if it's a smaller density area and you have more traffic in a smaller geographic area, if the time kicks over, that's when the access hours kick in.
but I
So
mean, is this 80 hours for the week, for example, total for all the buses? So if you have, 10, if you're under
Mhm.
the 80 hours total, but bus 5 took 2 hours to get home, what triggers it?
yeah,
Okay.
so again, looking back,
Okay,
this is
sorry.
a daily rate.
Okay. Okay.
Chair Taylor,
Yeah.
just looking at these again and comparing some of these numbers, and there's some significant differences here, like on the rate per hour, 54.13 versus 115.38 on the regular elementary and secondary routes.
Yeah, there's some big ones.
The rate per mile is different. The excess miles rate significantly different, excess hours rate. And then the rate per day, $259.60 for bid 2, as opposed to $121.79. You look at all
Yeah.
these numbers,
Yeah.
and they're significantly
Lower.
less
That's why I just tried to
on
say
the,
point it out.
on the first bid.
Except for the labor.
And so the second bid, though, comes in under the first bid, however, not by a whole lot, even without the shuttles and the fixed cost. I think adding in a shuttles and fixed costs for bid 2 would actually bring that higher than bid 1. That's just me and my eyeballs.
No, and I'm agreeing with all of those. I just wanted to know where we would see those excess hours because it was the only place that
Yeah.
it was higher. So that's all that I could see was those excess hours. So don't hear me picking it apart, just hearing me make that plug for labor. But I agree, it was lower.
And
The
on this,
rate for the extra miles was lower. And it was a very thorough bid.
and on the special needs, which is, I want to make sure that we're hitting, that was on the first bid.
Mhm.
The special needs rate was significantly lower than on the second bid. My
Significantly.
question in that is, are we going to see a difference in service for the special needs students because of that significant difference in price?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, That's where we go back to our RFP and we look at the things that we've defined and how we've done the door-to-door service that we have defined in
Okay.
that. So we have some contractual language that will help us in that part. So do I think that there's going to be adjustments anytime you make major changes
Sure.
like this, if the board so desires? Yes, there's going to be some changes and there's going to be some things that we're going to have to work through. And I think that's inevitable when you potentially look at something of this magnitude and how much change there is a part of it.
Yeah. I
But we
mean,
do, again, we were very thoughtful and thorough and what we think is thorough, but I also imagine there's some situations that we did not
But I would
encounter
also,
for that are going to occur, but that's normal operating procedures as
Sure,
well.
I understand that. $160,000 is a big difference though in that line items for special needs. And and again, I just want to reiterate that, and I don't think we'd ever do this, but I just want to see any obvious services cut, especially in that line item for special needs students. Okay, sorry.
nope, it's trustee Sue.
I want to recognize something you said at the beginning. This district had a 64-year relationship with Brown Bus Company. What are the ways? I wrote down a question. I said, how can we fix this deficiency? Do we have to reopen this bid for another month? Can we open for a week? I mean, what are the state laws on this?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Sue, the board has options. They can accept the qualified bid. You can accept the 0 bids and request us that we put it back out. I am very concerned if that board does choose to do that because that's a mandatory another 4 weeks of a bid sitting out there and waiting. Now that puts us towards the end of July. I do not think we'll have any other competitors that will be able to bid at that point in time because of the procurement time for busing and for all the other necessary things, employees for anybody is going to be a challenge to do. And so I think that if the board chooses to do that, obviously we will operationalize it to the best of our ability and we will put it out and we will do our best work on it. But it puts the district at a significant risk of not having buses day one.
So there is no option to open another week. It has to be a mandatory 4 weeks.
Correct.
And I agree that it's for
So
the
Chair
sake of our
Taylor and
students.
Trustee Sue, I
Yeah.
appreciate that because it is an Idaho code. This is, as I mentioned several meetings ago, this is the one rare bid that is mandated how much time it has to be opened.
I just feel like this first bid matched your energy. It's very thorough. It's for us to try to save as much money for our constituents as possible. We have to be fiscally minded. Realistically, where I see this higher, in my opinion, are the right places. They've already expressed to us that they're going to be paying for those 5 days. We know that labor retention is a huge deal. They're very open about what their access hours would cost. My assumption would be, again, labor, like that's what they're looking for. I agree with Trustee Kirkman. There's a lot of things in here that are lower. This is thorough. I feel like I understand what we're looking at. I know there will be some changes. I don't personally believe that this board wanted to be here. I think that this all came down to money and the $2 million that we just didn't have. So I think that we were between a rock and a hard place. I think that you have fulfilled as an admin team what we've asked you to. Not only have you saved the money, you've produced money. The first bid is very robust. It is very thorough. I mean, I don't want to spend any money because we don't have it, but this shows us where the money's going. It shows us that we have shuttles. They're very open about where that money is going. And I mean, we're here because we really had to be, or we had to make other drastic cuts. And I think that you guys have fulfilled what we've asked you to do with this.
Chair Taylor, can I ask
Sorry.
a?
And then Trustee Sue.
On this, another difference between these 2 bids, and I think this is maybe worthy of some conversation or discussion, is what would the cost be, the additional cost to the district be if we chose bid 1 over bid 2 when it comes to where the buses are going to park when they're not in use? Does that make sense, that question?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, it does. And I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to answer it 2 ways. The first one is, again, we recommend, or we have a non-responsive bid. And so it is not a bid that we can even consider, is what what our legal team
Has
has
advised.
provided. So we're talking about a lot of superlatives. These are things that are they're outside of our scope because we don't have another bid that meets the requirements.
Okay, so you can just leave it right there.
Perfect. Trustee Sue.
If there's no further questions or comments, I would like to make a motion.
I do have a comment, just if we did, because of the timeline, I truly believe we would not be able to have bus service provided
No.
for the
Yeah,
students.
yeah.
And part of the decisions yet to be made for next school year is the actual schedule, so that we know and we can publish that to our constituents, and they're concerned about that. And any further delay in figuring out busing will complicate that and push that information out farther, which will make life even harder for people who are trying to plan for the fall. And so I can't in good conscience, think that we should reopen the bid. I just don't think we have the time.
I agree.
So,
On that note, and I'm sure that this was considered, I just want to get it out there in the public. Whatever, obviously, if it was bid 2 that was accepted by the board with Brown Bus Company, they're already in place. Bus is ready to go. If bid 1 from First Student, I'm assuming with pretty good assumption that they will be ready to go, transitioning, all that, because that's part of the RFP and the whatever that contract might be.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, you're correct. That's part of the components that they have put in information as far as the RFP as their plan and what that would look like. Both bids were requested to have that information.
Will the RFP become the contract, or will you have to draw up a new contract?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, great question. There is a master
Great question.
contract that is already a part of the RFP that was approved again by the state, and it's a state contract that we add those amendments that we have in the RFP to it.
Are liquidated damages, things like that included in that master contract?
Correct.
Okay.
So when if whatever we accept, sorry, my mind is going down this trail. Whatever we accept, whatever RFP we accept, by default, will we still have to approve the contract? Because those, according to what you just said, those are two different things, right?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, that is correct. So this is to approve the RFP process, then we'd go back and we would fill out the contract, and then we would bring the contract back to the board to fulfill.
Got it. Thank you.
This is to approve the bid.
Yes, this is approve the bid.
right, and then just for timeline, because that's immediately where my mind is going, because the time is so short. I know we have, the budget is next week, is that correct? Would there be sufficient time between now and then to get the i's dotted and t's crossed and present as part of the budget?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Benz, I've given it everything I've got to be able to get it on your guys' docket. So I will continue to work to meet your timelines. I don't foresee any issue with that. But again, at that point in time, as soon as the board decides one way or another, then it allows me to start maneuvering and figuring that timeframe out. I don't foresee at this point in time anything that would stop us from having that ready for the next board meeting.
Okay, so then again, because the timeline is so short, now's our opportunity then, yes?
Chair Taylor, trustees, I think it's just been important to, behoove the point that this drastic of a change, it likely is, we may have a very difficult start to the school year.
Yes.
Going with the bus company this late in the game. Yes, the contract is there. We do feel that they will be able to fulfill it, but it's just a big change. 64 years is a long time. And it does make me nervous as a superintendent, starting the fall out that way, but I don't believe we have any other options.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve bid number 1 as presented by the administration.
I second.
Okay, before we
Now
go,
speak to it, sure.
thank you. Should we add? I didn't even get to ask my
I already
question.
know what you're gonna say.
The reasons.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say, should we add first students?
Well, yeah, I mean, we need to make sure we identify which bid, and Trustee Sue could probably do that. But in this, because I do think there's some specific legal reasons in addition to just everything else of why this might be accepted. Do we need to add those reasons so that they're on the record?
I already, board members.
Have you been taking notes?
Yes,
Okay.
it is very clear because it was stated numerous times that due to the non-response bid for Brown Bus, the board could only consider one bid. But I did also go about in detail the whys.
Add some of those. Okay, I just want to make sure that
And I
that's
will
there.
also have, you guys will proof them as well.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
I also seconded that so I can speak to it. So there was something that I wanted to clarify for our community, and it is because we've had a 64-year relationship with Brown Bus. Both Brown Bus and First Student, they're both national companies. And so I did want to make sure that Brown Bus was not a locally owned and operated company. Both companies are national companies. So again, not at all that specifically, I don't want to have relationships with people who are not local, but it was something that I took into consideration because we have been in such a long-standing relationship with them. But to reiterate, both companies are national companies. And then to take that a step further, I do believe that we will have some hiccups just starting the year, but I was able to, again, in communicating with Dr. Russell, First Student is a national chain. They have service district as large as Boise in our area and very recently. So they do have some presence here. And again, it was just important for that to be on record if we ended up going with a different company.
So does the motion need to be changed since it's already been seconded?
I will amend it. Yes, sir.
You just need to amend that motion to add
Okay.
whatever.
Madam Chair, I would like to amend my motion that we approve the the bid for First Students as presented by the administration.
Second, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. We have accepted a RFP for bid for the bus contract, and now I will entertain a motion to move us into executive session.
Madam Chair, I move that we move to executive session per Idaho Code 74206-1J to consider the labor contract matters authorized under section 74206-1A and B of Idaho Code.
Second, Clerk Lamont, roll call vote.
Trustee Taylor?
Aye.
Trustee Kirkman?
Aye.
Trustee Sue?
Aye.
Trustee Benz?
Aye.
Trustee Jennings?
Aye.
Okay.
I was laughing because Courtney stood there like, oh, great. Now what do we do?